Welcome to Prepare the Way, a show dedicated to all matters related to the new evangelization. I'm your host, Martha Fernández-Sardina, Director of the Office for Evangelization of the Archdiocese of San Antonio and of Prepare the Way Enterprises, a ministry dedicated to helping Catholics become everyday evangelized evangelizers. I'm back. I'm dressed in red. This is part 2 of a series with my guest, Auxiliary Bishop Oscar Cantú, in which we're speaking about this month of prayer for religious freedom. Fortnight for Freedom is what the bishops of the United States have called for, 14 days. But we here in San Antonio have extended it to a 34-day month of prayer for religious freedom. Welcome back, Bishop.
Thank you, Martha. Good to be here.
It's good to have you. I'm dressed in red, as I explained in the first show, because red is the color of passion, it's the color of martyrdom, it's the color of the Holy Spirit, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and also on our flag, and on the flag of many countries, red, white, and blue. We've been discussing in our first show the Mexican Revolution and the Cristero movement and the fight for religious freedom in that context.
Sure.
And we began to speak about the defense and even the fight in that sense, the defense of religious freedom and freedom of worship in our own country here. The bishops of the United States, you're one of them, you're very concerned with erosions to our religious freedom over several years, but more specifically within the last several months. Let's pick up where we left off. What is this HHS mandate and why are you so concerned?
Well, the mandate is essentially requires the coverage of that all insurance coverage include coverage for abortifacients, sterilization, and contraception. And those three elements go against our conscience as Catholics. And so so we've objected to that we can't pay for that. We don't provide that in conscience. And so this law is essentially requiring us to violate our conscience. And so that is fundamentally goes against the First Amendment.
The First Amendment says what? Or should I read it here?
Sure, go ahead and read it.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, are the bishops saying that in order for us to freely exercise our religion, government should not force us to violate our own conscience and our teachings?
Well, you know, the government is the administration is saying that, well, we're not saying you can't worship, so you still have a freedom to worship, but it's not only worship; it's the exercise of our faith, which goes beyond worship.
In other words, not just what we do on Sundays, but what we do Sunday to Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
And the exercise of our conscience. And so part of that is as Christians, as Catholics, we reach out to the poor, we educate. And so our Catholic charities are institutions of higher learning. That is part of the mission of the Church. And so the exemption, the religious exemption that this mandate is allowing is so narrow, it only allows the houses of worship, such as parishes, to be exempt, but not necessarily our Catholic charities or our universities.
So let's clarify this for people. There was an accommodation or an exemption, but the bishops are saying, no, it's not any accommodation for real because we educate the poor. We don't, because part of the exemption, if I'm not mistaken, and the accommodation is if we serve Catholics, but we don't serve just Catholics. Our schools, universities, hospitals, Catholic charities, etc., are filled with people of faith because we serve others not because they're Catholic, but because we are. Is that correct?
That's right. Sure. And so, yeah, unfortunately, this exemption, this religious exemption, is just too terribly narrow to limiting it to houses of worship, and not our other institutions. Whether it be it hospitals or universities, so you know that's the mandate and the problem with it. The greater issue is that this is an infringement on on freedom, the freedom to exercise and to live according to our conscience. And isn't that what America was? Isn't that part of what makes America great? That people are allowed to live according to their conscience.
And not only what makes us, part of what makes us great, but isn't that one of the main reasons why we even established this nation? So as to have that ability to, as later was put in the First Amendment, the ability to not have the free exercise of our religion prohibited. I want to read a quote here from Archbishop William Laurie of Baltimore. He's the chairman of the Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty of the United States Conference for Catholic Bishops, and he says, "This is not a matter of whether contraception may be prohibited by the government. This is not even a matter of whether contraception may be supported by the government. Instead, it is a matter of whether religious people and institutions may be forced by the government to provide coverage for contraception or sterilization, even if that violates their religious beliefs."
Right. Yeah, and it's again, it's an infringement on the free exercise of our faith, of our conscience, and of our religion. So this is, and as Cardinal Dolan put it, this is not a fight that we went looking for. It was something that was brought to our door, and we're having to respond, and we're responding with determination, because this is just too fundamental to our ability to practice our faith. And and many others have supported. People who are not Catholic have shown their solidarity with us and said, in this regard, we're all Catholic, because this is striking to the heart of what it means to be American.
Yeah, so that's a good point that you make there, because some people in the media sometimes gives things, some media, a spin, and don't believe everything you hear on television, except for Catholic television in San Antonio. But sometimes it's just the bishops, it's just those men who know nothing about what women's needs are, it's just some group of, no, this is the bishops who are the teachers. This is we united with our bishops who do understand the needs, and here's a woman telling you the bishops do understand the needs of family and women and religious freedom. This is also Jewish rabbis and Muslim leaders and other people of other Christian faiths. And also, even an atheist could probably stand with us on the issue of whether or not a government has the authority to force certain practices on a religious group.
Right. Well, and kind of backing up a bit, the Catholic Church and the bishops specifically have been advocating for wider coverage of health care, because there are too many people in this country who do not have health care, do not have health insurance, because it's so expensive, because it's difficult to, or because of their prior conditions, they're are not admitted to plans, and so there is a need to have access to health care. But this is not the way to do it. Effectively, this is forcing us to, in a sense, to abandon it. So in that sense, yes, we are for a wider availability of health care to our to residents and citizens of the United States, but it has to be done in a way that doesn't violate conscience, that doesn't violate the First Amendment.
I'm glad you bring this point up, because, again, sometimes in certain media outlets and even in certain Catholic circles, sad to say, there's a spin, and it's, oh, that's the bishops or the church not wanting people to have health insurance. They don't care about the poor or about this, and or sometimes people say it's a partisan issue, one party or another, and I have no parties to side with. That's not that. What it is that they've slipped into what is known as Obamacare, this health care reform or so forth. They slipped this thing in here that we cannot live with because it is not. In fact, some are questioning whether it is constitutional. And in fact, the Supreme Court is reviewing this.
Sure.
And there's a number of lawsuits around the country from Catholic institutions, universities, and organizations and apostolates and so forth, because they're saying this cannot be supported and the mandate must be rescinded.
Right. And that's, as, going back to Cardinal Dolan's comment that we didn't go looking for this fight, but it came to us, and we will fight it vigorously. And we've tried through negotiations, and those have gotten us just about nowhere over the past several months. And so now we're looking at we're going to the judicial branch. And so therefore these lawsuits were filed, and so we're responding appropriately, and we will respond vigorously to defend this fundamental right to practice our faith and to live it, not only in church but on the streets and wherever we are, so that we don't have to violate our conscience.
People may not realize, and we're here to remind them, that if this is not fought vigorously, if we as Catholics, and especially the laity who have, that is actually our primary call, is not so much to be doing all kinds of little ministries inside the four walls of our parish, that too. It's actually, this is the call of the laity from the Second Vatican Council to go out there into the public square and say, wait a minute. If we don't, bishops and people, if we don't do this, it could happen that we become a nation like Mexico with its very strict anti-religious laws that we've spoken about in the first part of this series, or France, or for that matter, China, where the church has to check in with the government to have everything approved. That could happen, couldn't it?
Well, it won't happen. It certainly not. People are too. I think we realize how precious our freedoms are in this country, and we would never allow that to happen. And that's why I believe that so many people of other faiths, people of no faith, have supported the Catholic Church in this fight, because in this sense, when it comes to conscience, we're all Catholic. When conscience is violated, that we appreciate how precious our freedoms are, particularly our freedom to practice our faith.
When we come back from this short break, we're going to define what that means, conscience, because that even is misunderstood, and we're also going to talk about what you and I can do, praying and advocating during this month of prayer and beyond. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Mexico is under siege. A plot to poison the minds and hearts of our people, to turn them into religious fanatics. This evil, this threat, it will not be tolerated.
You're an army fighting for God and for the church. We will fight with honor and dignity.
In the United States, we've been following your war with the Catholic Church.
I would hardly call it a war.
There is a time for peace, a time for war.
Even if I were younger, I would not fight.
You cannot fight for something you don't believe in.
I believe in freedom. The fate of Mexico is in God's hands, not yours or mine.
This will be one of the most important battles of our struggle.
If you lose this war, we're not going to lose this war.
Why are you here?
We want to be Cristeros.
Cristeros.
Yes.
We are going to send a message that freedom is our lives, and we will defend it or die trying. ¡Que viva Cristo Rey! ¡Que viva Cristo Rey!
Welcome back to Prepare the Way. I'm your host, Martha Fernández-Sardina, with my guest, Auxiliary Bishop Oscar Cantú. Bishop, before the break, we were talking about these erosions to religious freedom, but conscience. Sometimes people misunderstand what the church's teaching is on conscience, and they think whatever I want to do or feel comfortable with, whereas it's really something else. It's God speaking into that inner sanctuary. And in our previous episode, we talked about God's law and natural law. Tell us just a little bit about what that is.
Well, you know, conscience is tied to truth, that you know, we are obligated by natural law and by divine law to follow our conscience, because the church in its tradition believes that is where God speaks to us. Now, we also have an obligation to form our conscience. So, according to objective criteria, how do we do that as Catholics? Well, there's a whole menu of things that we should do. First of all, through the Scriptures. Through listening to the Scriptures, to reflecting on the Scriptures, through reading the Scriptures, and we do that regularly on Sundays in our worship, and that's the first thing we do, is we listen to Scripture and reflect on it. The tradition of the Church's teaching, so being aware with regard to particular issues, what has the Church taught about the particular issue? So becoming cognizant. Now, we do have a particular teaching authority we call the magisterium. That is the body of bishops throughout the world in union with the Holy Father, with the Pope. So that body of voices is critical to listen to. What does science say? So what does science say about particular issues? What does the community wisdom say? And then to take all of that to prayer. And so that is part of the process of the formation of our conscience. So it's not just what I think or what I feel, or what the local newspaper says, or whatever newspaper says. It's a whole process of forming the conscience.
And in our previous show, I quoted St. Peter from Acts 5, 28 and 29, I believe it was, where he says, it is better for us to obey God rather than men, meaning precisely that, to obey that which God has revealed and is speaking to us in our hearts and to the Church of Christ, rather than human laws that are contrary to that. So this whole thrust and vigorous defense of religious freedom and freedom of conscience that the bishops are shepherding us into, and that many lay men and women are following suit with, this is very important for us. And lest anyone think, and we have been accused of that we are more Catholic than American, or that we're not American. I want to read the very first couple of lines from this beautiful document from the Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty of the USCCB, titled Our First Most Cherished Liberty, a Statement on Religious Liberty. And the bishops say, quote, "We are Catholics, we are Americans, we are proud to be both, grateful for the gift of faith, which is ours as Christian disciples, and grateful for the gift of liberty, which is ours as American citizens. To be Catholic and American should mean not having to choose one over the other. Our allegiances are distinct, but they need not be contradictory and should be instead complementary. That is the teaching of the Catholic faith, which obliges us to work together with fellow citizens for the common good of all who live in this land. That is the vision of our founding and our Constitution, which guarantees citizens of all religious faiths the right to contribute to our common life together." And so that's what the bishops say, and that's why we are saying we as Americans and we as Catholics will not allow erosions to religious freedom that is part of our founding and of our fabric.
Sure. And there have been other instances as well of the limiting of the free practice of our faith. For example, in some of the harsh immigration laws in certain states, where there has been a prohibition of quote-unquote harboring illegal immigrants. Well, you know, if that means taking someone to the hospital who is in need of medical care, we're going to follow our conscience according to our faith and according to our beliefs, over and against what we believe to be an unjust state law that prohibits this harboring of illegal immigrants. And so, unfortunately, it has this erosion of the free exercise of our faith, which goes beyond worship, is in other we find it in other aspects and in other laws that have been created across this country as well.
And the bishops mentioned that in this document, Our First Most Cherished Liberty. They give a list of several things. For example, the immigration laws you mentioned. Sometimes space has not been rented out to religious groups, which is being rented out to non-religious groups, so there's a discriminatory attitude there. Sometimes student organizations on campuses are not allowed to, say, wear a religious T-shirt or a cross or this, or have as a student organization, to have a status on the campus, whereas others are not, with a misunderstanding of the so-called separation of church and state, which is a misunderstanding of what we have as a belief in this country.
Right. Well, yeah, unfortunately, that's that the separation of church and state, that phrase is nowhere found in the Constitution or in any of the Bill of Rights. That separation referred to is that government does not interfere with the free exercise of religion.
Or establish a religion.
Or establish it.
But doesn't interfere with religions.
Right. And so it's not, people have used that term to say that the church has no right to speak in the public square, which is absolutely wrong. We have every right to speak in the public square. And that's part of what we do for the common good.
And all the services that we provide, I think we began to speak about this a little earlier.
Education, healthcare, for the common good.
Yeah, hospitals, universities, schools, elementary schools, high schools, sporting events and programs, and outreach to youth and inner city events, all kinds of things.
Sure.
If we even removed the church's services from society, all kinds of things would collapse. Services would not be provided that the government cannot provide and need not provide for citizens. That's why we have faith-based organizations to do so.
That's right. How many non-Catholics have been educated at Catholic universities? How many non-Catholics have been treated, have been healed in Catholic hospitals? How many non-Catholics have been served through Catholic charities? And that's if the government is going to limit our ability to do that, then what happens to the common good in our outreach to society?
Bishop, in this call for a fortnight for freedom, 14 days of prayer and fasting and advocacy and education, catechesis study, the bishops say, and we in San Antonio are making it a 34-day month of prayer. They highlight, the bishops, you all highlight several saints who were actually, they gave their lives for religious freedom in other countries, starting on June 21st with the feasts of St. John Fisher and Thomas More in England, who were willing to die rather than deny the faith. They highlight Saints Peter and Paul, of course, the great apostles, the first martyrs of the Church of Rome on June 30th, John the Baptist, the great precursor, the one who prepares the way of the Lord. His feast day is on Sunday, June 24th. Justin Martyr begins, of course, the whole month of June. We need to be willing to pay the price for religious freedom. And we need to draw from the strength that comes from prayer and from looking at our elder brothers and sisters who have gone before us and who have been willing to stand up for what God has revealed to them. Is this a time for us to also examine ourselves internally and say, am I truly following what I profess? In other words, I profess belief in Christ. Am I proclaiming that in the public square? And am I willing not only to live the faith, but were it ever necessary, God forbid, but were it necessary to die for it?
Well, sure. And I think it need not be quite so dramatic that we're not being called to shed our blood at this juncture. But yes, I mean, the word martyr means witness. We need to give a witness, a public witness of our faith. And what we're calling for is reasonableness for this country simply to follow its own laws, to follow its own First Amendment, and to respect our freedom to practice our faith as it has historically done. And so, so we're not calling for something that is unreasonable. We're simply calling for this country to practice and to keep its own laws that are already on the books. And so that's what we're praying for. We're praying for reasonable minds to rise up and to really reflect on what's happening here. You know, the church has been an integral part of the fabric of this country and has contributed tremendously in education and healthcare and in so many ways through the history of this country. And now its ability to reach out is being severely limited.
And we need to make sure that it's not further limited. I want to invite our viewers and listeners to go to the websites that have been prepared for that, the usccb.org website, our own archsa.org, freedomofreligion.org, another website of ours, and to listen carefully and discern carefully the Catholic voices that they hear, because not every Catholic voice is truly Catholic. So let's listen to our bishops and follow their lead. Thank you so very much,
Thank you.
Bishop.
Thank you, Marta.
And let's remain united in prayer throughout this month and beyond. And check out the website for Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship in this very crucial year of elections and decision-making. Until we meet again, brothers and sisters, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May He smile upon you, be gracious to you. May He show you His countenance and grant you His peace.